you well know, meeting our climate commitments is not going to happen overnight, and it will require strong leadership and planning to get there. So SEAI are keen to provide tangible examples of public sector organisations who are at different stages of their decarbonisation journey. So for this session, we're going to hear from people who are at three loosely defined stages of reducing their energy emissions. They're mobilising, they're strategising, or they're delivering. And we hope that this session promotes cross-pollination of ideas and solutions across the various sectors. It's going to be a lot of information, so keep notes, and then you can use the opportunity at lunch to follow up with people and ask more questions. So our first group of speakers are at the mobilising stage of their journey. These are organisations starting to develop their decarbonisation roadmap and organise themselves internally. We have the CEO of Donegal County Council and Chair of the City and County Managers Climate Action Committee, John McLaughlin. We have the Chairman of the OPW, Maurice Buckley, and Assistant Secretary of the Department of Social Protection, Paula Lyons. And they'll outline that decarbonisation looks like through a kind of unusual landlord-tenant relationship. And we have the Chief Executive of the Irish Blood Transfusion Service, Orla O'Brien, who will share the unique challenges of her organisation. So John McLaughlin, I might invite you to take the podium and tell us all about it.
Thank you very much for that introduction. And I might start just introduce, I'm in two capacities here today, I suppose. One, Chief Executive of Donegal County Council, and then, as mentioned, I took up chair of the CCMA committee that covers climate action, transport networks, and circular economy. It's quite a lot, but they're all interrelated. And I'm here, I suppose, in that and representing the 31 local authorities across the country. And while I'm relatively new to it, I was here about, I think, 3 years ago here at this conference talking about public lighting. And thanks to SEAI for putting it on. I think it's very useful here and to show what we are doing and the plans that we have in place right across the public service. Very important here. And thanks for that. I just might, I was struck earlier with some of the speakers and you gave quite a good introduction, I think, to the day. And in particular, I think Deeper said we were the solution to the problem. And I think that is accurate. We are the solution. And would hope to show you that as well. And it's not just a one-year event, but long-term we will be the solution. And just to recap what local authorities do, we have I would say we probably have a reach different from other bodies, probably into every household in the country through our structures. And we're made up with staff and 949 elected councillors across the country. So we have a huge reach in terms of the public representation and then the executive functions to deliver on certain services. And those services reach across, and just go through some of them, roads, which encompasses roads and footpaths, bridges, greenways, cycleways, and all active travel we heard the Minister talk about earlier, and all very relevant. I won't go into all the detail in this kind of an overview. Housing, we have a lot of responsibility in housing, and people know here in the room the huge pressure now on housing around the country. At the front end, we're doing housing for all. And I would say probably the top-class housing we've built now, absolutely the best, I would say, in the country by local authorities, particularly the ones we design and build ourselves. They meet all the requirements and into the future in terms of climate change, energy, accessibility, housing for life, and all those you can live in at any stage in your life. So we're at the front end there, on the cutting edge. But then we have thousands and thousands of older stock, built from maybe the 1960s and 70s, all needing retrofitting. Some part of the way there, some a long way to go. So we're at various stages. And it was introduced, as I suppose, as a sector that's mobilising. And we have a lot of things done on the journey, but a long, long way to go. And I think on that front, knows how hard we've done it, still not enough, and there's more to do. And we recognise that completely within our sector. We cover, and I won't go into the details in water, and Niall Gleason's up on water, and we do that jointly with Irish Water at the moment. We have libraries. We also operate the planning system for the country. And the Minister spoke about that, and maybe cumbersome at times. We're operating it. We don't make the system, but very relevant in terms of the planning consents for renewable energy, for example. And we all know it's difficult is getting wind farms through and so on, and the public process there. Also, I'd say very important for renewable energy in terms of the electricity network around the country and the planning required there, and to get that up to fit for purpose. From Donegal, and a lot of talk about wind off the coast and so on. But connecting that power to the people then becomes a challenge, and having the right cables in the ground or overhead for that. So we have a huge role, and then we have a huge role as councils of community engagement. And we've probably seen that best as a country under COVID, what we did, and now in dealing with Ukrainian refugees and how we're trying to work there as well. So that's our community engagement role, and some of that's new to local authorities and maybe not recognised. But that's the same as where we'll be strongest on the climate change agenda. We have, on climate change, we have what we do inside our own walls as the councils, and then we have how we can influence the wider community and to bring every citizen along. And that's where we love the challenge there, and we're up for it. I think what we have been doing, I suppose, and I was struck with some of the earlier chat, we probably started on energy savings some years ago, maybe 10 years ago, but it was about saving money. We weren't really thinking on the carbon aspect of it. It's about cutting back on just simply bills. Then it moved on then as the years came on, and back then we might have did things like on the LED lighting and so on, and indeed for water, the pumping water around the country and water treatment, try to save on bills. But that's moved on a lot now, so we have to consider the carbon component of energy now in everything we do, and we're doing that. And our significant energy users are our buildings, whereas our own buildings and offices, our libraries, our housing stock. Then, as mentioned, no different than Bus Éireann, we have a big fleet, and it's hard to run those now on the fuels that are currently available. And we're teamed up with some universities and trying to look at what's the alternatives, and will the technology come fast enough to allow the bigger lorries to run efficiently on renewable energy. So big challenge there. And then we have, and you might see outside, and give a plug to Aidan McGranner, Donegal County Council, a van here, electric one, outside. And so it moves that where we can, and around the country it's the very same. But we still need a breakthrough on that issue of range for the heavier vehicles. And then street lights, we talked earlier on, there's a session in the afternoon, we'll talk on detail on local authorities. The street lighting is a big one as well, but even that won't be enough on its own now, where we thought we were 2 or 3 years ago. Now we need more, and particularly on that carbon. We were introduced as mobilising. I think we have a lot of showcase examples. I don't go into the detail here, but a lot around the country, a lot of good example projects done, and particularly with support from SEAI. And might mention the retrofit of housing, the decarbonising zones around the country, all at different stages. And maybe mention it by way of an example what was done in Portlaoise. But it strikes you there, and anybody familiar with it, the huge work done, and yet in all it's not near enough. There's a long way to go, and the Minister talked earlier about the growth and the expansion of the country, and that huge challenge to actually deal with the past and then provide for the future and still have those carbon savings. So I think it was described as a daunting task, but we're up for it. And what we recognise as local authorities, we won't do it on our own. We need other partners. We'll play our part, but we need to join forces with others. And I think we're on our way there, and we have quite good structures in place collectively, and we heard there's the money will be available, and that's good. And I would say in the last 3 months or so, we got approval for 3 special officers in county councils. Each local authority now will have 3 on climate action, 2 for within the council structure, and 1 for the community. So that's about that's over 90 in the country. That'll make a difference combined with our existing resources. And it is an agenda item now in most management teams around the country, and the senior officers leading it with us on the energy performance officers or their senior members of staff, and that will make a difference as we tackle that. And I think, and I might soon finish up here. I think our spirit of it is that to bring everyone along, so no one gets left behind as citizens as well. That it's not about the ones at the very front of the class only. We need to lift everyone, and we have to those structures. I believe we have the structures in place now to do that right across the country, and we will join forces with other public sector bodies to do it. And just to finish and just say we're fully committed to doing that as a local authority sector, and it will require the investment and the people and the further investment, and that'll require investment on a multi-annual basis, not just the single-year budgeting. That's very important because the one-year cycle brings very little in terms of planning and delivery. So I'll just leave it at that. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much, John. And yes, I would like to say that these headings are very loosely defined. So you might have fantastic projects that have been delivered, but SEAI's headings are very loosely defined. So don't get upset about all the projects that you have delivered. Maurice Buckley, would you like to give us a sense of where the OPW is at in your decarbonisation journey?
Thank you. Do I need a zapper or is somebody? This one just there. This one just here. Okay. Good morning, everybody, and great to be here. So from the OPW perspective, I'm going to focus on one of our important roles in climate change, and that is the office portfolio that we manage. I'm kind of a tag team here with Paula, who represents the Department of Social Protection, because it is very much a partnership between the person who owns the building, which is the OPW, and has to manage the kind of infrastructure, and the occupier. So just to show you some of the stats about the public offices. So we would provide the accommodation for all of the civil service and a very large part of the public service as well, and the SCARDA stations and laboratories and everything, but I'm focusing on the office space. So people are sometimes surprised that there's as many offices outside of Dublin as there is in Dublin. And what's important is you see that kind of approaching half of the total offices and total floor area is leased. So half it is owned and half is leased in broad terms. So how do you manage reduction of energy in this type of scenario? Well, there's a few factors. I mean, the most important of all is behaviour and how we manage and occupy the buildings. And we should congratulate ourselves in the public service, really, because the first targets we were set in 2009, which was 20% energy reduction in the whole of the building sector and a higher target for the public sector, 33%, we met that target. In 2020, we were, across the full public sector, 34%. So that was a good start, and that was largely driven by changes in behaviour and relatively light changes in the technology, light switches, our LED lighting and lights that go off, and minor changes in how we manage the heat and electricity. Then it gets harder. So we can look at investment in the buildings, which I will in a moment, but then managing the portfolio. So what the OPW will be doing over the next number of years is, as buildings get older, we will try and release leases on buildings with very poor energy performance, and where we're taking out new leases, it'll be a prerequisite, or it already is a prerequisite, that they're of a higher performance. And we will then be investing in our own estate. And just to give you an idea of the age of the portfolio and the challenge that we face, these charts here show the different types of buildings by energy efficiency. So at the bottom you have Georgian buildings, so we have a lot of those, and we have a whole heritage estate, but I'm not going to touch on that today. The first generation of office buildings, the 50s and 60s, they're like very, very poor energy rating, a little bit better in the 70s and 80s. Second generation, the 1990s, we're beginning to see modern building standards. But it's really only the fourth generation from 2005 when you have the very high, the very good BER ratings and so on. And you can see between the left and the right bar chart there that the situation today on the left, but with all the planned investment at this point in time, the programs that are already sort of up and running under the National Development Plan, it's not a huge change between left and right. So to really get rid of that dark green and grey there and get more of the top one, we're going to have to invest hugely. So it'll be a combination of switching out older buildings, selling buildings, or not renewing leases on the poor performers, and bringing new ones and investing in the buildings we have. The pictures there on the right are Pembroke Lane, one of the modern buildings, the DPO, data protection. Leeson Lane is one that's been built at the moment, just off Stephen's Green, and Distillers is a big shared office development, and all of these will be to the very highest standard and will meet the targets already. Organisationally, and in terms of an approach, just to say something about what the OPW itself is doing. Our current strategy, which was written back in 2020, 2021, already before it became mandatory for public bodies to have climate action reflected in your strategy, we had 2 of the 4 themes of our strategy. They're sustainability and climate action as part of it. And the debate that alone started in the organisation, what is sustainability, the carbon footprint of buildings, what type of cement to use, all of this, to biodiversity in our parks and gardens, and what is climate action and the different parts of that, mitigating and adapting, because of course in the OPW we have the whole flood risk area where we're investing to cope with higher sea levels and increased storms and so on. So we're already very focused on making sure that climate action permeates through everything we do in the organisation. I think that's been quite successful. And organisationally then, within the management board, one person at Assistant Secretary Management Board level is now responsible for climate adaptation, and I think that's going to become climate action pretty soon because there's so much now in the new climate plan. And so we're trying to get the balance right. If you put too much authority and too much responsibility for this in one pair of hands or in one team, there's a bit of it, well, we'll leave it to them then, and we'll get on with the rest of the work. And of course, anybody who's involved in management systems and so on knows that the key to success is having it as a culture across the full organisation. So we're proceeding with caution and working through strategy and culture as our primary tools. So part of it is the mix and match of the portfolio. The big part is investment. So just a couple of examples. This is the biggest deep retrofit project in Ireland and one of the biggest internationally. It's Tom Johnson House in Beggar's Bush, which many of you will have happy or unhappy memories of going to, and LRCs and so on, whether you were the victim or the manager, it doesn't matter. But in the middle of all that crisis of defending your patch, you might have noticed that it was a G-rated building and very cold and drafty. So what we have done, and this is going to become the new headquarters for Minister Ryan's department, the DEC, Climate and Environment, is the frame of the building is as was. So stripped out everything in the building and replaced it with top-class insulation, windows, energy systems. So going from a level BRG, and if you're living in a house BRG, you're going to have trouble selling it. Like it really is bad. And this was occupied and used like 5 years ago to A2. And to get an A2 rating in a building like this is quite legit. We haven't got it yet because it's just coming to completion. But assuming we can achieve that, it'll be a fabulous success story and a big, big investment, and how appropriate the department that's going in there. And of course, the big thing is you're not getting all that demolition waste. You are reusing the concrete and steel, and so the benefits is not just the energy, but also the total cycle and sustainability. So that's on the largest end of the scale, and that building will be finished around the end of this year, the beginning of 2024. So it's well worth visiting or even driving past if you're in the area. And then a smaller example, which is one we're doing with Paula, and that is in Ennis Government Offices for the DSP. So it's a smaller scale building, and we have been involved in a number of programs with SEAI. The Optimising Power at Work was our main program so far in dealing with behaviour. Now there's a Pathfinder program with quite a significant amount of money there to invest and kickstart retrofitting buildings. So this again is an older building, smaller scale, occupied building. How do you do this work with people in the building? Blended working is our friend in this regard, because it's been possible, and Paula might comment on it, to have people working from home and maybe using half the building while the other half is being retrofitted. So this is ongoing at the moment. And again, not quite as spectacular, but going from C3 to A3, quite a big change. And a lot of that, and people will say, sure, we're doing it at home, we'll put in a heat pump and we'll be grand. It is putting in heat pumps and renewable energy sources or more efficient energy sources, but you can't do that in a commercial building. It won't work unless you also invest in the fabric of the building and improve its structure and its insulation level. So this has been wrapped around in external insulation, and the roofing improved and all of that, as well as the electrics. So That is it, really. That's all I wanted to say. Happy to take questions, but it's a huge challenge ahead, and it is very much, as I say, a partnership between the building owner and occupier. So thank you very much, everybody.
So Paul is going to give the other side of the story there, see what kind of a landlord the OPW are.
You ready, Maurice? Good morning, everybody. I think it probably still is morning. Paula Lyons is my name. I'm an Assistant Secretary General at the Department of Social Protection. As Maurice has said, we are in the position of being the tenant in many of the buildings. We own one building, which is our headquarter building in Busáras, Áras Fitzgerald, which you may be aware of is the office above the bus station, which is a listed building, which brings its own challenges, I guess, when you're talking about climate action and modernisation, etc. So just in terms of, I suppose, who we are, for anybody who doesn't know, the Department of Social Protection is one of the biggest departments of state. You probably would have heard of us, certainly during COVID times, because we were front and centre in terms of the response to the creation of the pandemic unemployment payment, COVID illness benefit, etc. And in the last 2 years, again, has been pretty exceptional, the response to the Ukrainian crisis and also the cost of living crisis. So we kind of have a lot of activity in the economy. Total expenditure in 2021 was 30.4 billion. 2.03 million recipients of social protection payments of one form or another, and that benefiting 3.32 million in total. So very large scale. We're across 200 offices all around the country, so there probably isn't a town that you will go into that there isn't an office of the Department of Social Protection. Branded Intro, what used to be known as the Employment Exchanges, became Intro a number of years ago, so you're probably familiar with the branding of Intro, and certainly, as I say, we have a presence right across the country. We have a staff of almost 7,000 between permanent and temporary staff, so again, a lot of people in a lot of places across a lot of offices in the country. So big challenges. I think one of the things, and I think it has come up probably in the speakers so far, in trying to address climate action and the challenge with the targets that are ahead of us, is how do you organise yourself within the organisation to do that? So for us, having the right governance structure, a robust governance structure, is really key to what we do. And it starts at the top. So from our Secretary General, who is the CEO, if you like, of the department, and the management board. So direction, leadership, example being set at the highest level. Climate action and sustainability champions is something that is now mandatory within the mandate that we have for our targets going forward. And a member of the management board, as Maurice has mentioned, has to step up as the person responsible and indeed as the champion for all things climate action. And I have that incredible honour within our department of being the sustainability champion on the management board. And it's not just, I suppose, it's not just a title, it's in relation to that influence that you can have at management board level. Because as Maurice also mentioned, you know, what you don't want to happen is that this is seen as just one part of the organisation's concern or problem or challenge. Everybody needs to work together, and that has come through, I think, very clearly from the discussions thus far, that this needs to be collaborative. The other officer, I suppose, we have in the mix is our Energy Performance Officer, who is here today, Christopher McCamley, and he will be speaking later at one of the sectoral breakouts. And anybody with an interest in energy management should certainly attend Christopher's talk later. We'll be talking through our journey to accreditation for energy management. So I think that would be interesting, again, for anybody who is starting that journey. We have a dedicated climate action unit, and the guys from Climate Action Unit are here today as well. So again, giving that focus, you know, that there's a central point where we're looking at all of the issues, all of the challenges, how we're going to move forward. And that's very visible within the organisation as well. And we use our internal intranet system to really have that as a spotlight, you know, so we've lots of activity, lots of visibility of what's happening from a climate action point of view. But one of the most important, I think, in this structure is actually at the end of the diagram here, which is our energy officer network throughout the offices that we occupy. So somebody within each office has a responsibility as an energy officer to mind our energy management. So it's right down at local levels. It's not just at the top, it's not just at the middle, it's all the way through the organisation. And we've also created green teams, which are volunteers of our staff that are interested and are motivated to get involved in making the department greener. So if you put all that together, that provides, as I say, quite a robust structure within which we can move forward with our ambition for climate action. So our journey thus far, we started, and again, others have mentioned, with the optimising power at work in 2009 and monitoring and managing energy through the SEAI reporting system back in 2009. So we got on, I suppose, to a steady structure in terms of how we would manage. And somebody else this morning mentioned about data, and as we know, data is king in terms of influence and influencing behaviour if you can put facts in front of people and not just anecdote or emotion. So it's been very useful to have that data to be able to track. But back in 2020, we started the process for the ISO 50001 accreditation, and we achieved that accreditation in June 2021, started in 2020, and it took us, the guts, I suppose, of a year thereabouts to get the accreditation. We're the first government department to have that accreditation assigned to us, which we're really proud of, because that is a great achievement. And it's mentioned also in terms of the mandate moving forward that organisations would get either this or a similar accreditation. So again, as I say, Christopher McCamley, our Energy Performance Officer, will be speaking on this later. He's going to go into some of the detail on it, just the journey through it. So if you're interested, as I say, would encourage you to attend. And we're very happy as well to share our experience with anybody who's interested after the conference. If you want to get in touch with us, really happy to walk you through. We got a lot of support on this journey as well from the SEAI and OPW, just to get us kind of on the right track and in order, because it's quite as any accreditation is and should be, it's quite a robust, I suppose, process in order to get that get up to the level where you are accredited. And it's not a once and done, as you know. You have to be re-accredited each year. So happily we came through that re-accreditation process this year. So on now to our climate action mandate, which I suppose is really, the topic du jour about and why we're here to look at how we're going to move forward. So on a pathway to 2030, the first thing for us to do now straight away is to complete our climate action roadmap, and we have a good draft of that in play at the moment. On the energy management side, I think we feel we're in a good place. We feel we are on track to reach the target for 2030. At the end of 2020, we had a 42% reduction, so we were a higher reduction than the overall average from the baseline of 2009. So if everything goes according to plan, we feel we're going to reach that target for 2030 on the energy management. But it will require us to continue to manage our buildings optimally. And this involves some of the stuff, again, that we have spoken about already today, which is about the upgrading to the LED lighting, looking at more efficient heating and cooling systems. I'll come on to that again in a second in terms of the bigger projects and plans. Lowering indoor temperatures, the kind of stuff that is, I suppose, in some ways the quick wins, that you can achieve results from without having to have enormous investment. Continuing the participation in optimising power at work and the promotion of the Reduce Your Use campaign, which is, again, as I mentioned, the Climate Action Unit would be very heavily involved in promoting that in the department. So we have very regular messaging on that, and our green teams at local level also supporting that effort. And again, it's simple stuff, but look, that's what this is about. It's about changing attitudes, changing behaviour, and the more that you can get that working as a norm, so it's not something different, it's something that we do, I think the better, we will achieve, or at least be better on the pathway to the achievement of what we're trying to do. Whilst obviously the energy management is going to assist us with our targets on decarbonisation, I think really this is where the real challenge kind of kicks in, because we have done a preliminary assessment of that gap to target of where we would be by 2030. And if we look at, if you like, what we had planned to do between now and then, we still have a big gap. So regardless of our current plan, we are definitely going to have to look at how do we build this up? Maurice has mentioned about the deeper renovation projects. Ennis is an example of that in play now, where we have occupancy of some. It's not just ourselves, our revenue and some others are in those government offices, but that will bring to fruition, as Maurice has said, through the Pathfinder, you know, I suppose a real example and tangible example of a deep retrofit. But I think for us now, the challenge is really painting the rest of the picture about what projects are we going to have to achieve to reach that target. And this really is where I think the partnership with OPW is so key, because, as I say, we only own one building, we're tenants of the other buildings, and within that there's that mix, again, as Maurice has mentioned, of some of them are leased, some of them are OPW-owned buildings. So I think at this point, for us, it really is about the clarity on the investment plan, clarity about where are we going next, what buildings will we target, where is the best bang for buck, should we be getting out of some buildings where there's poor energy efficiency. That has a huge challenge as well, as anybody who's involved in facilities will know. Decanting people out of a building, where do they go, the time, projects inevitably take probably longer than when they're first planned. All of that, you know, and within, I suppose, a reasonably small time frame, at least to 2030, onward to a longer time frame to 2050, but very conscious we're in February of 2023, the clock is ticking. So I think for us, it really is now about the where do we go next. Certainly the blended working has helped us in terms of building consolidation, and we're very ambitious in what we can do with that. I think it's a reasonable question to ask, if your people are not attending the office full-time, what is happening with the surplus of accommodation? We've already relinquished a couple of office spaces that we do not need because of blended working, and we've been able to accommodate staff within another building, an existing building. So, you know, all of that again in the mix will help. But I can't emphasise enough, I think, just the challenge ahead in actually trying to bridge the gap to 2030 and really nail down, as I say, where we go next. And we look forward to working with the OPW in that regard, and indeed our continued association and partnership with the SEAI to keep us right and keep us on the road. And as John had said, I think it is one of these, lots done, but more to do. So looking forward to that. Thank you for your attention.
Well done, Paula. That's really interesting. I'm going to invite a completely different type of organisation, the Irish Blood Transfusion Service and Orla O'Brien CE, to outline where ye are in your decarbonisation journey. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Kathriona. And yeah, very, very different indeed. So, morning, everybody. So, my name is Orla O'Brien. I'm Chief Executive of the Irish Blood Transfusion Service. So again, just to give a little bit of context, we're kind of at the other end of the scale to the earlier speakers. So we're much smaller. We are a non-commercial state agency. We are responsible for collecting, testing and processing blood and blood products for the people of Ireland. We're privileged to do that, and we are the only providers that do it in the state. We operate with 600 staff across 8 locations. 2 of those, we own the buildings in our main National Blood Centre in St James's in Dublin, and also one in Cork on St Finbarr's Hospital campus. We own both of those, and then we lease the remainder around the country. We rely obviously on our donors, of which we have about 164,000 people donating blood with us every year at about 1,200 clinics throughout the country. And we collect about 128,000 units of blood and 22,000 units of platelets. We also have a big patient testing, and we test about 140,000 samples a year. So we supply every hospital every day. So that's what we do. Why it's important from an energy perspective is we're highly regulated. With very stringent rules around operating parameters, and that in particular is in around our refrigeration load and also our high rates of air change in our labs and our clean rooms. To a lesser extent, we have obviously vehicles on the road going everywhere around the country, bringing blood to and from. However, we're highly energy intensive, in particular in Dublin. So in terms of our journey to 2020, that's not where we started, by the way, though it's that's a nice gas guzzler there, though. So our focus on energy started in about 2007. Our EPO has been very focused on decarbonisation since then. We did upgrade our building management system and our energy management system, which, like previous speakers have said, gives you a lot of information and data that you can then use. So we have been able to rationalise over the years. We have reclassified our main production lab, which would have been a Class D, which would have been very high energy usage. That's now a classified area, and we also were able to end on-site waste sterilisation, both which would have had big energy savings. We're in our National Blood Centre on St James's campus for 20 years, so obviously we've changed out a lot of equipment. So things like chillers and refrigerations, which are high energy users, we've been able to rationalise those somewhat. And obviously things like replacing LED lighting and so on has also helped. In terms of the SEAI, for us on our kind of journey to the 2020 targets, our benchmark was 2006 to 2008. And as of 2020, we had a 42% saving. And again, I think a lot of the other speakers have said, relatively modest things were able to get that down. However, in terms of 2030, I guess the obviously external drivers, as speakers have spoken to already today, but the public service mandate has been a big game changer. Certainly for me as chief exec and with our board, the corporate and ESG obligations that are now on boards has pretty much been very key in terms of focusing the minds of boards in terms of what they need to do. And a lot of people on boards, myself included, we're all have done leading on sustainability courses and so on. So it's put it very much focused it on the board agenda. In terms of our own staff, I mean, we're all finding with sort of that younger workforce, they're very aware about the environment, and on the photograph there is as part of our 2020 strategy, our own lab staff wanted to go for Green Lab accreditation, which was very much at their instigation, and they did achieve that in 2021. I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think we were the first clinical lab or public service lab in the country to get it. Obviously, with, I think somebody alluded earlier about the finance, the accountant being, I think actually it was Minister Ryan mentioned, it all be down to the accountants, but the accountants, what they are good at is in telling you how much you're spending, and certainly in terms of our energy costs. For us in the NBC, our electricity bill, for example, last September in one building went from 40,000 to 200,000, and we're expecting our gas bill to double. So it certainly was able to, that type of, I suppose, information helps focus the mind. But that said, we do know that 2030 will be more challenging because a lot of the low-hanging fruit as such has already been picked. If we look at the SEAI Gap to Target tool, I think most people are probably familiar enough with it. So the darker colours on the left-hand side is the actuals, whereas the slightly paler colours are what we've modelled out, and the purple bar is where we need to get to. So it's quite useful for us in terms of knowing that, so as I stand here today, despite us having modelled in the projects that we plan on doing, we still have a bit to go in terms of meeting our full gap to target. So in terms of what we are doing, there's nothing new here. I'll start by saying that, very similar to the speakers earlier this morning, we're engaging with the SEAI as well. They have the expertise. We're willing to be a pathfinder project, especially to get that expertise and advisory support. We are developing our climate action roadmap as well. We have the first draft of it done. We too are getting green teams set up. We're running workshops throughout the organisation in Q2. And very much that is, I think people have referred earlier as well to the culture, just making sure that everybody understands the role that they play in it and that it is making it everybody's job. In terms of, I suppose, the key learnings that we're, gleaning is that getting that board and top management support is is absolutely critical, so that you can leverage on that in terms of for funding and so on. Certainly in our organisation, from this month, it is the first time we're having sustainability as a standard agenda item on our board. So it's now being reported on at every meeting. Getting a detailed energy audit carried out to allow you to understand your own emission sources so that the correct decarbonisation projects are selected. That's something we're doing too. I think Anne-Marie mentioned earlier about changing gas boilers. We're in the same boat. Our building in NBC is 20 years old and we have to change our gas boilers this year. Now they are gas boilers, so but I'll have mentioned about us being very heavily regulated and there's very stringent controls. So it's important to us how we work that out. So we are prepared to not make that decision right now, to allow us to do that energy audit and then get proper evidence-based advice and guidance to help us decide, well, how can we manage that and how can we manage it in terms of our 2030, but also the longer goal. And for some of the technologies, they might not be quite there for, say, a building that is sort of very heavily regulated, but we still have to test it. Likewise, some of our buildings, certainly our building in Cork is it's over 25 years ago. Anyway, it's a modular build, so we are replacing it. But I suppose one of the learnings, I just assumed that was going to contribute quite significantly because it will be built by 2030 and that might get us over the hump or through the gap, but in fact it doesn't because it's only 10% of our energy usage. So just a note to the... you think a big build is going to save you a lot and it actually doesn't. And I think from the SEAI's perspective, in terms of our dealings with them, just sort of it landing that there isn't a silver bullet and that it is about continuous improvement. There's no big bang to get you there any quicker. You just have to pick the projects that will get you as close to your target as you can. And that's it. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Orla. That's such a fascinating breadth of tasks and challenges and problems ahead. William, what do you take from hearing from all our speakers there?
Thanks very much. So listen, there was a good range of presentations and discussions there. First of all, I suppose from the local authority perspective, John outlined the massive remit of the local authorities. Big responsibility with local authorities, but also a huge opportunity. So, with local authorities, you have your housing, planning. They're a significant power user, and they're also responsible for adaptation. And I know Maurice referenced adaptation as well. So, local authorities going forward have a huge role in decarbonisation of our energy system and our climate action going forward. I think as well, John spoke to the change in the language from energy efficiency to carbon, to quantifying things in carbon and getting our mindset and our language to move towards carbon, because that's what it's all about. And John referenced the importance of that. I think as well, through the CCMA and LGMA, bringing 31 local authorities together, it's a fantastic network. In SEAI, we've been working with local authorities for many years, and they're all excellent. Some are better than others in certain areas, and I think so that network and opportunity is hugely important. I think John made the point then as well about the fact that there is there's 3 staff members per local authority that will bring up 90 new climate employees in the local authority system this year, which is fantastic and very welcome. But he made the very strong point around further investment, and I think that kind of underpinned quite a lot of the language, or quite a lot of the presentations today. In terms of Maurice, buildings, the OPW, he gave us a very strong sense of the portfolio that the OPW have and the challenge ahead. The excellent work that's been done on an exemplar like Tom Johnson House, which, as he referenced, is the minister's new home. So it will be an exemplar. I think it's fantastic that we're addressing embodied carbon, because that's the next thing. At the moment, what we look to do is the performance of buildings, but embodied carbon is huge as well. And to be able to point to a project like that, that's reusing the facade and reusing the rubble to actually continue to be involved in the construction project is fantastic. I think Maurice referenced adaptation as well. OPW have a huge role in adaptation, which isn't directly energy related, but everything within climate relates to climate. Maurice focused on the investment needed again. He gave us a very good graph on the challenge ahead, and even with the projects that are underway at the moment, the exemplars and the pathfinders, there's still a significant body of work to be done there. I think that it was also fantastic to see the next presenter, Paula, who actually followed on from Maurice as a user, as a public service user of the OPW, and I think we can all agree the DSP are an absolute exemplar. I was blown away by the structure that's have been put in place, blown away by the fact that they've strove to accreditation on 50,001 of an organisation of that scale.
I thought that was going to get a round of applause, I have to say. I think we should give one for it. Take it.
I think so. It is absolutely a best practice organisation, and I just got a sense. I think the cultural piece was referenced by a couple of the speakers is so important, and that behavioural piece. I think as well from a public sector perspective in SEAI, we had a significant number of targets to 2020, and everyone talks about the 40% that we did on renewable electricity, but no one talks about the 33% we hit as a public service, because as a public service, it's kind of focus on 2030 now, as opposed to stopping and saying that was a fantastic achievement. It was a fantastic achievement to hit 33% reduction in 2030 off our baseline at 2008. And that only happened because the 350 public bodies and departments made it happen. And that's, so I think that's been a fantastic achievement, and that was referenced twice by two of the speakers. I think the pathway document was excellent, presented by DSP, and but again, the scale of the challenge that exists and the gap, how large the gap is, even for an organisation that is doing things in an exemplary fashion. Orla gave us a great presentation on a non-commercial estate agency, but you could get the same level of culture. You could get the fact that they started this journey in 2007. So it's been enshrined in the work of the blood transfusion service over many years. I think it's very clear they're environmentally conscious. I think the piece around the importance of boards, senior management, but then the other end of the scale where you have your environmentally focused new recruits, and we see that in SEAI both externally but particularly internally. And I say this, it's like if I put a coffee cup in the wrong bin in work, someone's walking around saying, "Who owns this coffee cup?" I mean,
it's
people
the CEO.
are serious. People are serious about this, and it really is part of what they. Even today, when the minister came in, the Young Greens were the first ones to get the shot with him. Like, they really are about how they can change the world, and that's really important for us to recognise. I think the 33% is a fantastic target, but the Irish Blood Transfusion Service hit 42%, so they went 9% above where they were supposed to, which was fantastic. I think some of the recommendations there, two of them that struck with me, this concept that there is no silver bullet. There is no silver bullet. Every yard is a hard yard for the moment, and there is no silver bullet. There is going to, we can't wait for, technology that might come at some point down the road. We have to act now. And I loved that concept there earlier, and Orla referenced it again around these long-term projects, or these projects forever. I really like that language, as to the things that we do now are really important. we were outside with the minister earlier on, and we asked the people from DCU. This building here was built in 2002. It looks fabulously new. It was built in 2002. If it had been built past 2007, we wouldn't have to come back and retrofit it. We're going to have to come back and retrofit it. And I suppose the point is, these forever projects, anything we do now should be done with a focus on the future of not having to come back and to do very much with these things. And I think, in lots of ways, whoever is responsible for what's happened in climate and how we're at 61 million tonnes nationally, it doesn't really matter who's responsible. What's very clear to me now, it's fallen upon us to fix it, and for us to fix it between now and 2030. The first half of it between now and 2030, and the second half of it between now and 2050. So I think that's the kind of forward focus we have to put on things.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, listen, thank you to John, to Morris, to Paula, to Orla for sharing your perspectives and all that you're doing in your organisations. And I wish you lots of luck in the next 7 years. Big round of applause, please, for our panel. I'm now going to welcome our next two speakers on stage. These are representing public bodies at the strategising stage of things. They already have a decarbonisation strategy and are preparing how to implement it. Please welcome the acting CEO of the HSE, Stephen Mulvaney, and President of UCC, Professor John O'Halloran. And Stephen, sorry, I'm not going to let you rest for long. I'm going to ask you to give us a good insight into what's going on in the HSE and its enormous organisation.
Afternoon, everybody. I knew I shouldn't have sat down. Okay, so look, as we know, in May 19, the government declared both a national climate and a biodiversity emergency. So we're very clear in the health service that the climate crisis is a health crisis. We're the body charged with addressing people's health needs, and we're fully committed to leading by example in that context, including in terms of reducing greenhouse gas emissions and in leading a preventative approach to avoid the negative impacts of climate change. Now, if we think about those negative impacts in terms of the human health and strains on the healthcare system, for example, we know that episodes of extreme heat can increase emergency hospital admissions for heat-related illnesses and death. We know that poor air quality triggers a growing number of respiratory and cardiovascular diseases. Severe weather, such as droughts, are impacting on water and food supply and flooding and storm issues, and changes in temperature and rainfall altering waterborne illnesses, vector-borne diseases, and overall infectious diseases. And also environmental degradation and extreme weather events are affecting mental health in terms of anxiety, depression, and PTSD. So for Europe, heat-related diseases and mental health-related issues linked to climate change are our most imminent health risks. So healthcare is also a key contributor in fueling climate anomalies. So we have high energy intensive buildings, particularly our hospitals. We have wasteful procedures and use of single-use goods, particularly around infection control. We have significant transportation footprint both of patients, for example, 3.3 million patients attended our outpatient clinics last year, and our over 150,000 employees. We have global supply chain emissions, including related to pharmaceuticals, supplies, devices, and food that we use in the provision of health and social care. And clearly we have significant purchased electricity, gas, heat, and cooling, including transmission and generation. So the healthcare sector, as this slide indicates, if it was a country, it would be the 5th largest emitter on the planet. And Ireland, as you see on the right-hand side there, other than those 4 countries who are in the top emitters over 1 tonne per capita, Ireland is in that second list of major emitters. So clearly this means us, healthcare and social care in Ireland as well. So the advice internationally has always been to start with energy and buildings related emissions, and that's the advice the HSE has taken. We know the government's actual targets are so far focused primarily on energy related emissions. So we have prepared, or in the process of preparing, 3 key HSE health sector strategy documents. The first is around our overall capital and estates property strategy. within which the first objective is to achieve a net zero estate, a net zero building infrastructure by 2050. And that's currently going through an approval process by our board. The route to achieving this objective is outlined in the HSE's infrastructure decarbonisation roadmap, which we published in November last year. That roadmap sets out our approach and a detailed set of actions to achieve the climate action targets. It also satisfies our public sector mandate. And we've also developed a wider climate action strategy, which is also with the board in final approval stage, to start looking at the non-energy and the non-built environment related emissions that we can influence, such as around procurement and greener models of healthcare delivery. So beginning to tackle, as the slide indicates, our Scope 2 and Scope 3 issues. So we've started, and we're by no means finished in relation to energy, but we've also started to look ahead to those other areas. So if we focus on the energy side and we look at our HSE infrastructure decarbonisation roadmap, our Capital and Estates team have developed this roadmap, which outlines the approach to achieving the target set out in the Climate Action Plan. It identifies 7 key areas to continue, to enhance and to expand on the work in progress made to date. And in summary, the HSE in recent years, we've done a number of things. We've developed a joint 3-year rolling capital funded partnership agreement with SEAI that commenced in 2017 in advance of the first Climate Action Plan, and a pilot programme in 2018 to prove the concept, and proceeded with about €200,000 in seed funding. Today, the current 21 to 23 3-year rolling fund has an indicative capital allocation of about €60 million. This funds regional energy bureaus, energy officers to support local energy management teams, the green teams that colleagues refer to, shallow retrofit works, deep energy retrofit pilot pathfinder programme, and other developmental programmes. And if you look at the overall journey, and there's a range of areas where we're currently working on. So we have progressed and are collating and the consolidation of our energy usage data. We've identified about 170 significant energy users, SEUs, which together account for about 75% of total energy use across the over 4,000 buildings, 4 million square metres of built infrastructure for the health sector in its entirety. And the focus of our efforts and resources are directed to those 170 SEUs. We've established 3 regional energy bureaus and employed 11 energy officers to support local energy management teams at our significant sites. So that's 111 supported teams in place at the end of Q2 last year. The target is 140 by the end of this year. This supports the HSE directly run teams, but also our partner voluntary organisations, the Section 38s and Section 39 organisations, which together with ourselves provide the bulk of health and social care in Ireland. And we're supporting specifically 26 teams in those voluntary organisations. We've implemented a shallow retrofit minor capital upgrade programme to support the work of the energy management teams. This involves energy engineering works such as LED lighting upgrades, window and insulation upgrades, heat pump installations, and so on. There's a total of 599 projects have been progressed at about 187 locations, with about 28 million invested between 2019 and 2022. Our estimates are that we've made savings of something like 52 gigawatts, about 14,800 tonnes of CO2 emissions, and about 5.2 million in annual savings. And the projected spend for this year on these projects is about €16 million. We've also established the Capital and Estates Climate Action and Sustainability Office in 2021. We've restructured and augmented what were existing resources with the appointment of a senior manager and additional resources to lead the team. And that includes the appointment of an energy performance officer. And again, we're actively supporting with a number of arrangements our directly employed staff and those voluntary organisations. We're also exploring with colleagues district heating opportunities, and we've been heavily engaged with the City of Dublin Energy Management Agency, including colleagues in Dublin City Council and the SEAI, in exploring opportunities to implement district heating solutions in the Dublin area. Schemes in discussion include potentially the use of the waste heat from the Covanta waste recycling plant at Poolbeg to potentially serve St Vincent's Hospital site, particularly after we transfer the maternity to there, and the surrounding Sandymount residential areas. We've also adapted and implemented an energy efficient design and towards carbon zero methodology on all of our new and replacement buildings on the HSE's 1 billion annual capital plan. So we're one of the first public sector bodies to have mandated the inclusion of this approach as part of the overall design process. It seeks to ensure that all new and replacement works are progressed through the plan will be designed so that they achieve the highest energy and emissions performance and that they are carbon zero ready. We've also commenced a deep energy and carbon retrofit programme for existing buildings, jointly funded in partnership with SEAI under a public sector Pathfinder capital project. Detailed design for 10 representative sites by a broad base of design experts who've been selected by the HSE to progress and report on viable deep energy retrofit solutions to meet climate targets and projected associated costs. These range from some very big sites, like Our Lady of Lourdes Hospital in Drogheda, to medium-sized sites, our typical community nursing units, such as in Clonakilty, and health centres, such as in Neenah and Tipperary. The cost of deep energy retrofit works of these 10 pilot sites is estimated to be in the order of 250 million. More accurate costs will only be available once the Pathfinder Stage 1 design is available in later on this year in March. We're progressing technical partnerships with higher education colleges and an academic partnership with Technical University of Dublin as part of the overall Pathfinder programme. We've continued the rollout of the SEAI Engaging People programme, which has been tailored specifically for healthcare with the assistance of the SEAI colleagues. And we've completed a statutory compliance assessment in 2021 and also developed our Green Healthcare programme. We've also commenced an improved metered data and utility data programme, including integration with our new National Estates Information System. And in addition, the Office continues to support the wider HSE climate action and sustainability strategy, which, as I said, is currently being reviewed by the board. So, in fairness, and I suppose in summary, we'd say we've come a reasonably long way. I believe we're well positioned, particularly in the energy front, given the level of structure that's been put in over recent years. It is, as colleagues have said, about kind of a continuous improvement culture. This effort will never, in reality, be over. And of course, every effort of this nature is a team effort, involves colleagues internally and externally. But I would like to call out two key players in this. First, the importance of the relationship with colleagues in the SEAI and their huge and ongoing support, expertise and encouragement. That has been invaluable to the health service. And in fairness, as I said, while everything is a team effort, I'd be remiss not to call out one individual on our team without whose vision, ability and a capacity to build and maintain relationships and teams, we wouldn't have got as far as we are and be as well set up for the future. And that's my colleague Peter Smith, who's out there in the audience somewhere. So thank you, Peter.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, Stephen. It's really interesting to hear the breadth of what the HSE are doing and how defined the plans are. 2026, 10 new places, and we look forward to availing of being the benefactors of all this deep retrofitting. John O'Halloran from UCC, would you like to share what UCC are up to?
Thank you, Katrina. Good afternoon, everybody, and nice to be in another President's University, the Derek Keogh, so thank you for being here. So I want to say something briefly about University College Cork first. It's a 178-year-old university. If you look at the size and scale of the institution, it's the 14th largest settlement in the country. So 25,000 students, 3,500 staff, and another 3,000 part-time staff. And the real champions, as has been mentioned by many, are in the audience for me today. That's Mark Poland, our Director of Estates, and Pat Mehigan, our Energy Manager, and Maria Coran. I'd like to just tell you a little bit the story about University College Cork. Our journey goes back to 2000, where we established as a university our Environmental Research Institute. So at a university, we have, I suppose, in this context, three responsibilities. One is to manage our estate and make sure that it's energy efficient. Two is to educate people. And three, to undertake research and push the boundaries of research in carbon as much as other areas. We're proud to be the first green flag campus in the world and also the first university outside of North America to get a Gold Star Award for sustainability, which included our carbon areas. It's a journey for us. The journey in sustainability and decarbonisation is a journey for all of us in investment, but more importantly in behavioural changes. I think we've seen many examples here this morning. But it's also about being focused, and you can see just some examples. I'm not going to go through them there. As we pepper our way across this, from finally most recently establishing in my own office the Office of Climate Action and Sustainability. I'm an ecologist, and being a president of a university at this time is just really exciting. I was reminded that I wrote my very first article on sustainability in Leaving Cert way back when in the history of time. So if you wait long enough, the world will catch up somehow along the way. So I'm really proud to be part of that. But our journey continues, and this week we launched our new strategic plan, but part of that is our new action plan for climate action and sustainability, which is nested around our research. How are we going to drive this agenda and continue to do that? And the cost of that, I think we've seen examples already where when we start to do things, there are costs. One of our new laboratories for research, which is at the quantum end of computing, uses 4% of the entire energy of the institution. So how do we reconcile the pushing the boundaries of research, but also ensuring our energy conservation and protection and our climate action obligations? But we believe with our strategies, and I'm not going to go through them here, but we have strategies for each of these to enable us as a whole institution to work together as we continue to evolve and adapt our approaches. This is a gap analysis that we got involved in. It's done by it's the globally recognized gap analysis for higher education. And what this gap analysis sets out to do, you can see our scores in 2018 and our scores in 2022. Because as a learning organisation for all of us, whatever the scale and size, is that its most important thing is that we look and see how we can make our improvements. So you can see very clearly on the 2018 score, our buildings and energy were very low. And actually very quickly, once we start making corrections and start making actions, then we can really make a big step change. And this is really important to our community, to let people see the positive actions. This data is in the public domain. People can click on, this is from ASHE, AAASHE, in the United States, who undertake this for us. All the data is in the public domain, so we can be accountable to our own community, but also accountable to the global community. This is our UCC carbon footprint, our scope 1 and scope 2. It's pretty typical for higher education. It's about 45% scope 1 and 2 and 55% for scope 3. Clearly with gas and combustion for scope 1, electricity from the grid, scope 2, and then you can see the rest. And you can see some of the consequences of student accommodation. If you start to bringing strands of work together, if there isn't accommodation for students are going to have to commute more. Then their carbon footprint starts to increase. Academic travel, we're an island nation, we have to rely on academic travel. But at the same time, we have to work at each of these dimensions in our universities. And it was very nice of Paula to have the other graph earlier to explain this graph here. And you can see from this our baseline, our 2021 target. And then once we decarbonise the grid and we get our electricity completely from a decarbonised source, we're still left with that gap of over 4,000 tonnes at the end of this period. So we've got a significant body of work to do as we work together, both in our behavioural change. And we think behaviour is really important, as well as investment that we've greatly enjoyed from the SEAI and others. We have a number of infrastructure projects, Pathfinder projects, like many people have mentioned already this morning. Our Rahilly building, which is one of our mid-term buildings, we've reduced the emissions by 40%. Our Pathfinder funding now at another building is going to reduce our emissions by 50%. And I was struck by Morris's problem at the OPW, having some very old buildings. We have some of the most old buildings you might expect in the university. And one of those has already achieved an A rating in energy. So we can do this. We have the technologies, we have the ability, but we just need to commit to doing it together with putting the resources and infrastructure in place. This is our deep retrofit buildings, a building that I spent most of my own career in, and this will reduce by 50% the emissions from this by a whole range of steps. And again, we are hugely grateful to the SEAI for their support in this regard. So if you look at the behavioural changes, we've talked about it a bit today, and Pat Mehagan in the audience and Mark Poland achieved energy champions in each part of the institution. But whatever people saved, they got it back. So if you look at the graph on the left-hand side, on the left you can see a yellow line, that's the total consumption in 2015. And by within 5 years, we have almost saved an entire year of cumulative electrical usage by enabling our colleagues to save the schemes. These are in individual buildings, in this case 13 buildings, so they harness in individual actions. We give green energy teams, we've seen a lot of that commonality across all our organisations this morning, and supported by an energy manager, constantly communicating, pushing the boundaries, and this in this case is Patrick Meehan. But we're giving the people the money back to reinvest in this case the library or whatever buildings that's is relevant, and devolving the power and decision making with a 51% in improvement in efficiency, with 21% absolute reduction in energy consumption over that 5-year period. And these are impressive numbers for these buildings, enabling our staff to do, and our students to enable to change their behaviour. Procurement is mentioned a few times this morning. We find procurement is one of the great drivers of what we seek to do, not only for ourselves, but also cascading it down through the ecosystem. And we are lucky to have a colleague, Fiona Thompson, who I know has spoken at meetings like this in areas of procurement, and it certainly helped us enormously in achieving many of our objectives, not only in the carbon area, but beyond that. So sustainability is one of the 6 principles now of the UCC procurement strategy. It's now included all the technical selections and criteria and exclusion and award criteria for everything we do, including our energy purchases. And what's really interesting is, if you look at the last bullet point there, it says refurbishment of printers to sustainable print management policy. That's not only saving energy, but also doing other aspects of circular economy. And what was really interesting to us, it wasn't a large company that supplied those cartridges, the refurbished printers. It was a small Irish SME. So we're creating opportunities for innovation for others to develop with us and share the challenge of changing the world and making it a better place. We also believe by leading by commitment. All of UCC grounds are managed by biodiversity, no low mowing regimes. We have fully divested fossil fuels and signed the principles of responsible investment. And again, I think all of us should go down that journey. We've signed the United Nations Race to Zero campaign. And interestingly, one of the things we try to do with our staff is we let them borrow the e-bikes so they can begin to see how they can change their behaviour. And let's try them and see how they work, and let people see how far it is to get home and how they find getting up the hills with them, and all the combinations that make the significant behavioural changes that we believe are really important to enable us to divest from our fossil fuels, both in our consumption or transport, but also in the organisation. As an organisation then, a university with 25,000 students, graduating about 7,000 students every year, we have an absolute responsibility to help change that behaviour on an evidence-based system. We have 6 teams as part of our connected curriculum, of which sustainability is one. We have a university-wide module for everybody, including members of the public, on sustainability, including energy and carbon. And we have an open source SDG teaching toolkit developed for our staff, which has been adopted by the United Nations, as changing the curriculum in the universities right across the world today. And we've got digital badges and a whole range of initiatives to enable us to advance the learnings, but also the professional development of staff. And one of the most recent developments we have is an online program for sustainability in enterprise, where we have 50 people taking that program, funded by the Higher Education Authority, as a response to the need for this particular skills agenda. But also the word literacy has been coming up. The language we use, have we got the same language? People talk about ESGs, they talk about carbon, talk about a whole range of things. And yet some of us are not necessarily on the same page. Which brings us nicely that UCC has its own carbon literacy training. This is a program that's online for all our staff and students. It's accredited by the Carbon Literacy Project in the United Kingdom. We haven't scaled it up and out yet for the rest of the world, but we'd certainly be very interested in exploring how this toolkit can enable us to get to that literacy and common purpose in our language, but also to help to bring the changes that we think are important. We frame our entire research curriculum around the SDGs at University College Cork. Every single research project has been mapped now onto the SDGs. You can go to the website, you can see exactly which SDG and which publications and which impact and which spin-out companies are connecting to the SDGs today. And I think we're really proud of that. Ireland should be proud of it, because David Dunn, who the Irish ambassador, was the person who brought the SDGs to the United Nations. So I think let's continue that deep tradition of changing the world and making it a much better place. UCC also commits in terms of our staffing. We just went to the market recently for 27 posts in sustainability, ranging across the entire area portfolio, from finance right through to computer science, right through to maybe what people might traditionally systems in the sciences. So we are absolutely committed to investing in this and building the talent that's necessary that we've all heard about today. And finally, UCC, together with Queen's University of Belfast, are just about to launch a new network, an All-Ireland network, to enable us to engage with the United Nations on our Sustainable Solutions Network, where we can work together with local authorities, as we've seen today, NGOs and civil organisations, to express those SDGs in the world and make this country and this world continue to lead in this area. And on February 23rd in the NUI, it will be launched on that particular day. Finally, we heard quite a bit this morning, I think, about top-down, bottom-up. What we feel is the middle out is actually the really important piece. So we found in our university that the students were fantastic. So we have, our program is very simple, student-led, research-informed and practice-focused. So every year, cohorts of 4,000 students come to the institution, demand new and different things. We believe also that we should have a framework from the top down. which is our strategies, our forum, our biodiversity action plans, our ISO 50001, and our procurement strategies. But we believe the real places that things happen is in the middle, what we call the middle out. And these are national strategies, they're government climate action plans, the SDG plans, the Green Flag programme of our students, but also those teams that we talked about. These are the people who are going to make the changes in our organisations, and we believe to meet these targets and also make our climate better, but also make our biodiversity loss to be reduced in these circumstances. So finally, we believe that universities should be at the forefront of research and aimed at solving some of these issues. The Pathfinder programme for us in University College Cork has been fantastic, and particularly for the living laboratory, where we can try and fail, but we can try and succeed. I think that's one of the great joys of universities. But universities leaders must take leadership in taking the brave steps towards the change for a better future. We graduate 7,000 graduates every year, and many other institutions in the state do the same. We believe that this collaboration between campuses and within the campus will enable us to scale up our ambitions and deliver not only Ireland's targets, but also in global ones. We have the tools, we have the know-how. What is needed is the immediate and extensive social change. And UCC will commit to that, as we did this week when we launched our new strategic plan by Dr. Kathriona Devereux and Jeffrey Sachs from the United Nations to say we are going to secure our future. We can secure it through generating knowledge, through behavioural change, and through good education. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, John and Stephen. I think they're really fantastic examples of leadership on all levels and the impact that's possible when you consider the size of the HSE workforce and the size of the student population and that UCC community and the impact that'll have trickling down. But in terms of the kind of, William, in terms of the actual energy, do you have some thoughts? And I'm just conscious of the time. So in terms of SEAI got a lot of credit there in terms of assistance and help. What are your reflections on that showcase?
Thank you very much, Katrina. Well, first of all, from a HSE perspective, we found the HSE an excellent organisation to work with. The scale of the operation, everyone's very clear, massive operation, but very focused in from a number of perspectives, the cost of energy, the climate effect of energy, and I think from our perspective, Stephen also mentioned that piece around people, engagement and behaviour, which is hugely important. And also the concept of the potential for district heating, particularly in Dublin and the waste energy site, it usually excites us in SEAI. And then just from a UCC perspective, I think John very eloquently outlined the great progress that has been made in UCC and the strong passion that exists around sustainability. I think he's merged the corporate side of it, the academic side of it, and the passion of the staff and the people of Cork very well and very eloquently. I think as well, the other piece that came across was behavioural change and how well advanced UCC are in relation to the agenda. So they're my reflections.
Brilliant, fantastic examples. Thank you so much to Stephen Mulvaney and John O'Halloran.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. You're fine. So our final showcase, I don't want to call them the best of the bunch because I think we've just heard some fantastic examples already, but these are organisations that are delivering reductions and are well into their implementation phase, and they're only too happy to share with us all how they have done it. So I'm going to welcome, as they take their seats, only briefly, the Director General of the EPA, Laura Burke, CEO of National Transport Authority, Anne Graham, and Chief Executive of Uisce Éireann, Niall Gleeson. So Laura, you take it away, please.
Thanks very much, and absolutely delighted to be here today, and I've learned tons this morning already, and hopefully what you will see is a common theme in what we've been doing in the EPA, and no more than others, we've been doing it for a long time, primarily because of who we are. We have to be a leader, and if we're talking to others about what should be happening, we have to be able to demonstrate that ourselves. So if you look at our strategic plans, within them, our last two strategic plans, we specifically talked about our work within our own facilities, so it's not the broader work of the EPA, to improve our environmental sustainability. And in the most recent strategic plan that we have, we've specifically called out a very tangible target, which is to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by at least 30% by 2026 on that transition to climate neutrality. So trying to give ourselves a very strong goal in the short term then that we can build upon. And the delivery mechanism, I suppose we've been working on this for a number of years. ISO 14001 certification from back in 2010, because we're a very scientific organisation. We like structures and frameworks, and the ISO really provided that for us. This year, or last year I should say, we started reporting under the Greenhouse Gas Protocol. We'd been reporting greenhouse gases up to then, but actually again putting in that framework under the Greenhouse Gas Protocol, reporting Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions and some elements of Scope 3, with the aim to build on that again into the future with more Scope 3 emissions. And we've had a green team chaired by a director of the agency since back in 2008. So and that again, there's been talk about kind of roles, responsibility, accountability, having a director, and I was that director at one stage, mobilizing a really enthusiastic and engaged workforce is an absolute privilege. It was brilliant. Like, we've no shortage of ideas in the EPA. It's just trying to make sure that we're doing the right things in the right order. So what have we done so far? Since 2009, we've had a 50% reduction in energy. And I should say that the EPA has 9 buildings in 6 locations. So we're dispersed, not as dispersed as the HSE and others, but we are still dispersed across the country. And in order to get that 50% reduction in energy, it was really important for us to do energy audits, because again, it's a bit of, you need to know what the issue is and then in a strategic way address things rather than trying to do it in an ad hoc approach. So we had energy audits and they proved really successful to help framing the work that we needed to do. We've also had a 54% reduction in water since 2010, and this has been partly around measurement, because when we started doing good measurement, we were able to identify, for example, leakage and then address it. We've had solar PV, 10% solar PV since 2009 in our HQ building, and in fact, had the largest range of solar PV panels at one stage on a building in Ireland, but of course have since been overtaken. And that in the building in HQ that we had, it was an extension, and we worked very closely with Morris's team in the OPW, who are the architects. The aim at that stage was to be absolutely at the forefront of sustainability. And it was a really pleasure to work with those architects who were working with us on everything from solar PV to rainwater harvesting, etc. But now, back to continuous improvement, we now need to do more. We've excellent control over our waste and strong reuse principles. And this is everything from using recycled paint in our buildings to reuse of materials. And again, it's already been talked about when we're doing redevelopment of sites or upgrading of sites, reusing things, everything from doors, but also simple things like furniture can move from building to building depending on the need, depending on what's happening, and donating on occasion equipment we no longer need to, for example, local schools. In order to this continuous improvement and where to from here, we're now looking at what we need to do, and we've a 3-year rolling plan. Looking back to those detailed energy audits, what are the key things that we need to address now? Energy efficient lighting is in 70% of our building space so far, and we're finishing out and hope to have the balance done very soon. Building fabric, and Morris and others have talked about it already. There's no point putting in nice, fancy new systems that sometimes, people are talking about, oh, we'll get a heat pump or we'll do this, that, and the other, if the building fabric is not suitable in your building and all you're going to be doing is leaking out heat. So we do have a fabric first approach to our buildings, which means that then we can require less energy for heating, and then we don't need to have the same size of systems we might otherwise need. We will be having solar PV on all of our EPA buildings by the end of the year, and we're well on our way to that. And also electrifying our heating systems. Currently, we have heat pumps in one of our buildings in Clonskea, and we also have just installed a heat pump in our building in Monaghan. So we're well on our way again to electrifying our heat sources. And in fact, already around 50% of our space heating is by sustainable sources. So Mary was talking earlier about heat being kind of, in a way, the unloved child. That's something we've been actively addressing. And of course, we actively manage our energy use as well. On transport, the EPA has a fleet. A lot of the work we do is going out and measuring and monitoring on the environment, inspecting sites, for example, such as landfill sites. And we've had a policy of having either fully electrical or hybrid vehicles for a number of years now, but in a way we were ahead of our time, and we couldn't get the vehicles, the types of vehicles often that we needed in order to be able to do our work. However, that's changing, and we aim to be 18% fully electric by the end of 2023, and an additional 15% hybrid. On procurement, and there was already mention of green public procurement and the importance of green procurement. This is something that the agency has been promoting since back in 2014, where we had a green public procurement guide for all of the public sector. But from our own perspective, we are again fully committed to green public procurement, not only for capital works, but also, for example, for services. And that can be everything from our canteen service, but also to, as I said, printers. And somebody mentioned printers earlier. One of the things, I think the most successful things we did with regard to green public procurement was change our printer system and have a printer management system, to which one of the staff said to me she could hug the printer. She loves the printers because not only is it a lot more sustainable, but it's a lot more efficient as well. So just on the learnings then from our perspective, again, there's no rocket science here. You need strong commitment from the board and senior management. We take it seriously. We've got the time and commitment of a director of the agency heavily involved in the green team. You need to plan for net zero as a long term, but what are the actions that you're going to be doing in the short term to help you on that journey? Avoid the quick and what I would call, the sexy new toys. You need to do this in a strategic way. And I'm not saying that you don't need solar or PV or electric heat pumps. We're actively involved in those. But some of the kind of the less loved things like the building fabric is equally, if not more important, and you need to address those. And the last thing I would say is it takes time. This is a marathon, not a race. We need to be building up over time and doing more and more year on year. So I'll leave it at that, but thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Laura. And we've heard lots about the NTA, and Anne Graham is going to fill us in now on what Stephen Kent was hinting at earlier in the morning.
And thank you very much for the invitation. And my focus is actually not looking on internally as us as an organisation, but what we're doing externally in terms of driving the use of sustainable transport right across the country, and how that will help you as organisations and the wider public to make choices about reducing their transport emissions. So, and we want to lead in this space. We are one of the leading agencies, but we do work alongside our operators, including Bus Air and Dublin Bus, and a number of operators right around the country, as well as our local authority partners, because they are core to delivering the infrastructure, the supporting infrastructure that will drive people to use more sustainable transport. So we're involved in every aspect of addressing transport emissions, the whole avoiding travel, to reduce travel. So we're involved with local authorities and regional authorities in land use planning and encouraging better land use, transport and integrated land use and transport planning. We're involved in shifting then people to more environmentally friendly modes by providing public transport services, by providing active travel infrastructure. And then we focus as well on improving the technology and improve the fleet that provides those services. So looking at vehicle efficiency, clean fuels, and that's where we're driving now to zero emissions in the fleet that we use across our public transport. Now, we would not be able to do this, and we would not be in this position without all the supporting national strategies in terms of the NDP, the National Planning Framework, and now the Climate Action Plan that sets out targets for us as an organisation and drives us to deliver on behalf of the government. So supporting strategies are key to our delivery. We also have, there's a national sustainability mobility policy, that's the department's strategy, and again sets out targets that we will work with the department to achieve, and we're working hard on that. We then produce transport strategies for the different regions, and we've just completed the Greater Dublin Area Transport Strategy, a review of that. One for Galway will be recommenced. We need to review that this year. Cork, Limerick, Waterford all now have transport strategies in place. But for the first time in the GDA strategy, we had to look at the impact of climate action, and that's now included in our strategies, you know, to see, even with all the investment in infrastructure, can we still meet our targets in 2030 and looking forward to 2050? And that is a challenge that I'll discuss in a minute. But what these allowed us to do in the early years, by having a transport strategy, setting out what was needed from a public transport investment, that gave a framework for investment for when the National Development Plan was being considered. But in terms of just looking at the GDA and the transport strategy, when we looked at the climate action, and we saw that we needed a 51% reduction in CO2 emissions over the period to 2030. If all the infrastructure was delivered that's set out in that strategy, there will be still a gap in our CO2 emissions. So additional demand management measures will need to be put in place, which could be a combination of parking restraint, zonal charging, additional tolling, road pricing, further vehicle electrification. And now, because we now have the statutory document, we now to move into the next phase and lead on this, which is a demand management scheme for the Greater Dublin area, which will set out exactly what's required now for us to meet our targets. And I suppose we are happy to front up to this now. We now have to stop talking about it. This is the kind of action that we're going to need to see in order for us to meet our targets by 2030. As I said, by having strategies that allowed us then to put forward the infrastructure that needed in terms of the National Development Plan. But the reason I show this slide, which is, you know, the increased investment that we've seen, you know, in 2021, 23, it's building. But in the earlier years, from the time that we were set up in 2009, 2020, we wanted to get into a stable investment in our bus system in particular and have a regular reinvestment in our bus fleet. So we were set up then when it came to actually changing out that fleet to being either hybrid or zero emission. We already had that pattern of investment, and it just then needed to be stepped up in terms of what was the differential when you moved into the lower emission kind of fleet. So we're working with Iarnród Éireann in terms of electrification of rail. The DART Plus programme is a very ambitious programme to further electrify our rail system. But when we again wanted to deliver as soon as possible on the electrification of our rail, if we were waiting to put in place all the overhead wires, it would have taken us quite a number of years, beyond 2030, in some cases maybe, to deliver a fully electrified service. So the decision was made then to place orders for battery electric fleet, to allow then, with a small level of electrification at the ends of those services, it would allow us to electrify at a much earlier stage. So this was a choice that was made early, so that we didn't have to wait for planning to go through the planning system and the construction in order to get an electrified service. So in terms of Bus Connects then, one of the things I think that in terms of our learning was that by by looking to improve the bus system, we looked at every aspect of the bus system to improve it. And Bus Connects is looking at all aspects about making the services more efficient by reallocating road space for bus priority. But built into that was always that we would transition to a zero emission fleet. So that was always in our programme to do that. And this is our pathway to zero for our urban bus fleet, where we can see going from red, that's our diesel fleet, moving to just beyond 2033. We have a plan now to get to zero emission across all our urban bus services in partnership, as I said, with our transport operators. What we need to do now is look at our longer distance fleet, because that's much more challenging. Where do we go in terms of trying to improve the emissions across our regional services? And we believe that we need to now push the market to start delivering fleet that will be driving the emissions. And we're happy to take that step with the market in terms of trialling some fleet. So we have 280 diesel electric plug-in hybrids operating now in Dublin and Galway. So Galway is fully hybrid. We've got the first orders being delivered now for fully electric single deck, and you would have seen the launch of the first electric urban bus service in Athlone a couple of weeks ago. And we'll be commencing now with Dublin Bus in terms of operating zero emission fleet in Dublin later on this year. We also purchased 3 hydrogen-fueled double-deck buses that Bus Éireann are operating and trialling. And that allowed us then to trial this fleet until we went into our much bigger purchases. You know that we're investing in active travel. Again, this just shows you the level of uplift in terms of investment and the ambition of the government now to really drive people to using to walk and cycle as part of their journeys. So in reflecting on the work that we do, which is part of it is our core business, is to deliver sustainable transport, infrastructure and services. I think in terms of leadership in this space, some of the reflections that may assist you when you're considering your own plans, it does help to have supportive government and departmental policy behind you. I think you may need to consider including carbon reduction in all your strategies, whether they're the corporate strategies or even your outward-facing strategies. Build actions into programmes. So our zero emission reduction in our bus fleet was built into our Bus Connects programme, and that assisted us then to build the business case then for investment by government in the fleet. Learn from others. I mean, I think we have to see there are other places and other jurisdictions that have gone a little bit ahead of us. We don't want to be certainly the leaders in this space, but we want to be very much fast followers in looking at the technologies that are around and investing in those. Start small and test technologies, but be in a position to ramp up quickly, and that's where we think we are moving now in terms of certainly our urban fleet. And then advocate and engage as much as possible, because I think what we need to do in terms of our organisation is not just to encourage people to use public transport, but to really consider how they travel. And one of the things I didn't put here is just to also call out our smarter travel workplaces and our smarter campuses as well. The work that we do to try and encourage all you as organisations, public sector organisations, to consider how you travel to your workplace and can you be more sustainable in that. Thank you.
And finally, Niall Geeson from Uisce Éireann.
Thanks everybody for having us along. It's been a really interesting morning so far, and I'm going to keep this quick because I know you're all starting to shuffle in your seats there. So we're now called Uisce Éireann. Some people could be cynical. This is a name change to hide the past, but actually we're very proud of what Irish Water has achieved over the years. But the new Uisce Éireann name is to encompass the existing Irish Water, but the merging of the local authority water services staff into a new organisation. And because we're a new organisation, we've come up with a new purpose and vision. And our vision, or purpose there, if you look at it, it's about transforming water services and helping communities to thrive. So we know we're embedded in all the communities in Ireland, and we want them to thrive. And our vision is that we have a sustainable water system where water is protected, but for the planet and all it serves. And you may think on the planet side, you kind of throw your eyes to heaven, really, Uisce Éireann saving the planet, but it's to bring home that this is all about individual actions, business actions, and it is about saving the planet. This argument that Ireland is too small and, you know, if China and India are doing this, that and the other, what can we do to affect it? I think we do all have to act together, and there's a lot of work to do. There's a huge task, and the Minister mentioned this morning, what we need to do to achieve sustainability and to prevent climate change is enormous. So we really have to work hard on that. Just a bit about Uisce Éireann and what we do. Our main aspect is it's a balance of three things. One is protecting public health. The second is enhancing the environment. And the third is economic and social growth. So we've got three areas there that are sort of in constant, not turmoil, but there's a balancing act to go on between getting those right. So we've got a huge amount of money. We're spending 1.2 billion this year on capital investment. We spend about 800 to 900 million just to keep the operations going. So there's a big responsibility there, and we have to do that sustainably. So if I move along, our sustainability commitments, we all have these commitments. I have some concerns about how we can achieve them. If you look at our greenhouse gas reduction by 2030, it takes us between 5 and 7 years to deliver a project due to planning and construction constraints. So, you know, it's 7 years now to the end, to 2030. So it doesn't give us much time to get a lot of these projects done and completed. On the positive side, we are strand 6 of the UN Sustainable Development Programme. So we do deliver clean water and sanitation every day. So our main reason for existing is about sustainability. But I would have concerns about meeting those targets. We've done a lot of work. I'll go into what we have achieved so far. So we are the largest consumer of electricity in the public sector in the country. We spent, I think, in the region of, if you include our DBO operators, about 150 million in energy last year. A huge cost to the exchequer. So anything we can do to reduce that is going to make an impact on sustainability, but also on the bottom line for taxpayers. So we want to become energy efficient, low carbon, sustainable water utility. What we've done so far, we've built in energy efficient design. We're lucky in some ways. A huge amount of our energy consumption is pumps. We pump water and sewage all around the country, and our plants use a lot of pumps. We've managed to be able to hit some low-hanging fruit by replacing older pumps with modern pumps. That's been the relatively easy bit. The next stage is, the next part of our challenge is going to be a lot more, we need a lot more innovation. We need better, cleverer energy retrofits, that kind of thing. On water conservation, we have what we call our water stewardship program, and that's something that you should all have a look at, because it's a program where we certify people and get people involved in what they can do in their own areas, their own work schemes to reduce consumption, improve the use of water, all that kind of thing. So, and it's a really good program. It's free. Look at our website. You'll find the details on it. So I'd encourage you all to do that. On transport, we have a fleet of about 2,500, and we're trying to electrify that. One interesting challenge we had was a lot of our staff take cars home at night because they need to be on call or they go straight to work. And we had a problem with overnight charging. How did we separate the charging for the vehicle from the householder's bill? And we found a company, or they found us, that had a black box that literally we get the bill for the vehicle charging, and the householder sees nothing different. So the supply chain is there. They will help us. They're out to support us on these innovations. In some ways, certainly with Uisce Éireann, we're such a large organisation. Sometimes those people getting their foot in the door can be tricky. What we've achieved, we're down to 34.5% energy efficient savings. So again, a big achievement, but a long way to go on the road. And we're in a good position to meet our targets of 2050. We do have challenges, and I think we all have the same challenges. One of the challenges we're seeing is climate change is here. We're seeing more droughts. We'd have more droughts in the last 5 years than I think we had in the previous 20 years. I used to go on holidays in West Cork, Barley Cove. It was a pleasant place. I don't remember it ever being sunny and dry, and we had a 9-month drought there this year. We had hosepipe dams in West Cork. It's bizarre. The other thing we're seeing is very heavy rain. very heavy downpours, and that is causing turbidity in rivers, which is putting a lot of pressure on our drinking water plants, but also it's giving us a lot of stormwater overflows where it's overloading our sewage treatment plants. And that is something we need to start factoring into our construction. Do we put in a lot more pumps and concrete, or do we try and work with agriculture and other landowners to try and reduce the pressures and reduce these downpours, and to look at our water resources and look at see what is sustainable in the longer term? Another challenge we have is our rising energy demand. So where we don't have a sewage treatment plant, and Laura's always chasing me to get these completed and done quickly, a lot of areas where these plants aren't in place, there's nothing there now. There's no energy use, there's no manpower required. We put in a plant and all of a sudden you have all these costs. So our base cost is rising all the time. So we need to make sure the new plant we put in is as efficient as possible. The other one I'd just call out is, look, we're all familiar with supply chain inflation and challenges around the supply chain. We had a tender for solar panels this year. The prices went up 3 times, and we've pulled back on that a bit because we think we can do better, but there are going to be challenges in those areas. So what are we doing to address those challenges? So we've got 4 main areas of planning. The capital energy efficiency. So this is where we're going out to build plants. And when we're delivering 1.2 billion of capital investment every year, it's actually quite hard to innovate, because the plant you built last week is, that's going to work, and that's the one we probably should build, because that'll deliver the treatment plant as quickly as possible. But we need to be able to get innovation in there. So we need our supply chain. We need to change our tendering processes. So rather than give 5% for sustainability and they build a bug hotel or something, maybe you go 25%, but you put in a much more strict criteria. And we need to work on that, what that criteria might be. In the area of renewable energy, we would like to put solar panels on the roofs, but we'd also like to go further than that and put it on our footprint. But also we might like to put solar farms beside our plants, and that leads us to the private wire challenge. We have really good connections to the grid already. A lot of our plants are medium voltage connections. If we can connect via private wire to those sites, it would save reinforcing the grid. So I have been talking to the Minister on that, and he is going to have a consultation on private wire in the future, and we'll be feeding into that, and hopefully. But there'll be some movement there. But that is a big opportunity. When we spend 150 million a year on energy, it means we can go out to the market with that amount of money and talk to PPA operators and investors and see if we can leverage that and get a plant invested at zero cost to the taxpayer and a consistent charge for energy for the foreseeable future. I'm going to spend about half an hour going through the details of this graph. This just tells us, according to my team, that following the SEAI models, we are on track and we are going to make it. But I do think we have a big challenge to get through. Just on the SEAI, this is a nod to you. I think you've done fantastic work. You've come a long way from the guys who used to give you the grant to do your attic refits. Really, it's the expertise you have and the support you give us, and we're a large organisation, is really commendable. And the Minister talked about resources this morning. You need to make sure you keep getting those resources, and they're out there to support us, because this is going to be a long journey, and we need your help on this. Just finally then, it's not all about concrete and pumps. We are investing in nature-based solutions. So these wetlands, constructed wetlands where we can treat sewage through a kind of a reed bed system, they're really important. We're also, as I said earlier, we want to work with local landowners on how do we reduce deluges and reduce huge amounts of water coming through quickly. And that's investing in softer landscaping, all that kind of stuff. So there are nature-based solutions, and we're not all about concrete and pump in Uisce Éireann, and we are looking at different aspects. So I'll finish with that. I think one thing I've noticed in the private sector with the increased costs, they're more focused on the bottom line. They're thinking it's become more short-term. I think as a public sector, we can become exemplars on sustainability. And it's up to us to get out there and show them how it can be done. I think the supply chain will support us if we give them the sort of long-term vision that we're in this for the long haul and we can build projects. But we need to look long-term. We need to build these projects and these deliver 20, 30-year plans. I think it's really important. And I think if we collaborate, we can all come together on those. And finally, we all heard it. The man from Deeper says there's buckets of money. So I think we need to go out and spend it and make make it a better place. So thanks very much for your time, and good luck with your projects and plans.
Thanks, Niall. Yes, there is $1 billion left over, which is just a scandal in itself. But William, just to sum up before we let you go, all of that sounds brilliant. Who doesn't want that future that you're outlining there for the next 2030 and beyond? And SEAI's role in it is going to be fantastic.
Absolutely, and I'll be very brief here because I know we've kept people a little longer than we anticipated. So just a couple of key takeaways from the presentations and the speeches. From the EPA, like clearly what gets measured gets managed, and that's been discussed already. I think it's clear the EPA, the holistic approach has worked, and it's very important at an organisational level to get things right. And then one of Laura's learnings that I just resonated with me was doing the right thing, and it sometimes can take time, and it can take time to do the right thing sometimes. I know there's pressure to deliver fast. From an NTA perspective, I just think it's a fabulous organisation, and I think the power of engaged regulation is just phenomenal. And when we see when a regulator can go and talk to providers and talk to the challenge and the task that is Ireland's transport system, which is unique in itself, there's real power there, and it gives me hope around the emissions reductions that we have to hit in transport. And the other important piece was just embedding carbon reductions targets in all of our strategies. From an Uisce Éireann perspective, I thought the organisation's very, very focused on solutions, right down from employee electric charging at home. I didn't know that solution existed. There's probably a few out in the audience who didn't know that either, and maybe there isn't. Maybe I'm the odd one in the room. Solutions around private wire, and I know that's hugely important. And when we have the organisation with the biggest energy bill in the country, or biggest electricity bill in the country, talking to the minister about implementing that, it's hugely helpful and powerful to other organisations in the country. And then when I talk about solutions, nature-based solutions as well around wastewater treatment, which is crucial as well to the climate agenda. And that's pretty much most
Wonderful.
of my takeaways from the...
Well, listen, thank you so much to William, to Laura, to Anne, and to Niall. Thank you so much, everybody. I'll let you go in 2 seconds, but I just wanted to say I'm finishing up now, and I'd like to thank you all for your attention and engagement this morning. And clearly there's a lot of work happening already, and there's a lot of work to happen in the next 7 years. But I really think that enabling your organisation to transition to a more sustainable path is possibly going to be the most important and impactful work that you will do in your career. So if it seems daunting, remember that the great Nelson Mandela once said, it always seems impossible until it's done. So best of luck to all of you in your work. And as a climate concerned citizen, I thank you in advance for all that you are going to achieve. It's time for lunch now, you'll be glad to hear. And there will be breakout sessions in the afternoon on the various levels, and there will be lots of people to guide you to where you want to go. And again, there will be lunch on all 3 levels, so if you find a queue, move. So enjoy the rest of your day, and Gur Míle Mála.